On the show today, Zimbabwe plans to issue cash notes soon. South Sudan discovers new oil in Ada and plans output by year-end. Plus, annual earnings at South Africa's ShopRite miss estimates. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Business Incorporated. I'm Chimezi Obi Iwago. First, the markets. And positive sentiment was observed across major markets we track here on the African continent at intraday. The Nigerian stock index maintained Monday's gains, trading at 0.36% up at intraday. The JSE index in South Africa was up 0.08%. In Egypt, the EGX 30 was also green, up 0.90%, and the Nairobi stock market closed Monday's session up 0.34%. And major Gulf stock markets rose at intraday, buoyed by financial shares amid steady oil prices on optimism that U.S.-China trade tensions could ease and stimulus measures by major economies to counter a possible global economic slowdown. In the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi index advanced 0.82% as Emirates Telecommunication Group traded 0.6% higher, and First Abu Dhabi Bank gained 0.3%. Dubai's index was the only laggard at the time, slipping marginally, with Mashar Bank down 6.3%, the top loser. In Saudi Arabia, the index was up 0.32% as banking stocks extended gains from previous sessions. The index was also underpinned by some positive earnings. Qatar's index rose 0.91% in its third day of gains, with the Gulf's biggest lender, Qatar National Bank, gaining 1.4% and Ooredoo rising 1.77%. And in Europe, stocks were mixed in the morning as hopes for monetary policy stimulus temper investor anxiety over an impending recession. Meanwhile, Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil producer and the source of Saudi Arabia's disposable income, is still set to be planning to sell shares in itself to the public. That's where I'm going to start my conversations with Conrad. Hello, Conrad. Good afternoon.
Hello, Jimmy. Thanks for having me back.
You're welcome. Now, Saudi Aramco has asked banks to pitch for roles in the IPO, which is estimated to be the world's biggest initial public offering, raising potentially $100 billion US. How likely is it that this IPO goes down smoothly, given the rising tide of environmental activism and investors pricing in energy transition risks?
Well, Jimmy, that's a matter of a lot of discussion on the trading floors right now. Already now, about 1/4 of all assets under management globally are called sustainable investments. Now, of course, the notion sustainability is also something that people discuss about. Not all of the market participants have the same standard. But at least this trend shows that more and more investors, especially pension funds, large investors driven by mom and pop investors, like people like you and me who want to invest their pensions in a sustainable fashion, they discuss more and more how much an oil company like Saudi Aramco can match the definition of sustainable investment. Now, Aramco itself says that, of course, oil and gas will remain at the heart of the energy mix for many, many decades. Renewables and also nuclear were not really able to meet the growing demand. Also, Aramco says that its crude oil production has lower greenhouse emissions than many of its competitors. And of course there, Saudi Aramco is focusing on America and the shale oil boom, which is of course a pretty energy intensive way of producing crude oil. All this might be true still. It's rather doubtful that the Saudi ruler, Prince Mohammed bin Salman, will really manage to meet the 2 trillion valuation for Saudi Aramco. News agencies report about insiders of the company which say that it's more likely that Saudi Aramco will be valued at around about $1.5 trillion at the IPO, which is, as you said, planned to happen next year. The agency Bloomberg reports that Aramco has appointed Lazard and Moelis, two investment banks, and that more companies, investment bank companies, are invited to join, you know, the big communications spree that the company will then go worldwide. It will, of course, have to sell this story to investors worldwide.
Well, let's just hope that that IPO happens eventually. Anyway, back in Europe, stocks seem undecided this Tuesday as the political risks in Italy and the United Kingdom keep dominating the discussion. Can you unpack the developments in these two economies and markets for us?
Yes, well, the markets are a bit in a wait-and-see mode. Look at the German share index DAX. That's pretty much an undecided zigzag sideways line it's producing here. In terms of Italy, of course, everyone here is expecting from Rome that the prime minister of this populist Lega or League party and five-star party will either face a vote of no confidence or resign by himself. And then the question is, of course, will we see a very quick election in Italy, or will the five-star movement try to form a new government with some of the establishment parties in Rome? That's a question remaining pretty open, and of course a question making many people on the markets nervous. In terms of Brexit, the latest story that traders are talking about is that British farmers at the moment are rushing to bring their crops of, you know, wheat and barley and other agricultural goods to the spot markets as quickly as they can. The amount of wheat and barley traded at the moment is higher than usually at this time. And the focus is, of course, the Brexit date. British farmers are eager to try to make their deals and sell their, you know, future delivery of agricultural goods before the Brexit date is there. They're nervous that after the Brexit date, after a hard Brexit, finding customers on the European continent will become very, very difficult. Of course, import tariffs are something that those agricultural goods might be facing. Under WTO rules, the import tariffs on such goods like wheat and barley would be up to 90 euros a ton.
Now, the world's largest computer games convention has started in Germany's city of Cologne, and cloud games are the big trend this year. Briefly tell us about computer game industry in Germany.
Well, Germany is a big gaming nation. 34 million people in the country are playing computer and online games. Given that we have a population of 80 million, that's a fair amount, I would say, a big share. And people here are spending nearly 3 billion euros worth in computer and video games. But only around 4.5% of this goes to games made in Germany. So it really can be said, it's a big gaming nation in terms of gamers, but it's not a big producer of games. Still, Gamescom is the largest trade fair, the largest convention of its kind worldwide. Of course, Germany in the middle of Europe, Cologne in the middle of Germany. It takes only an hour by train from Frankfurt Airport to go to the Cologne Fairground. That's really a central point where it's perfect to market everything that's new in the game sector. And you mentioned cloud games. People are predicting that gamers will need less and less consoles and hardware. They will play more and more games on their phones, and the bulk of the memory power that's needed to drive those games will be resting in the cloud.
All right, Conrad, thank you for those updates. The Fed is expected to release its minutes later today, so let's keep an eye on that, and perhaps we'll talk about that tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of the day. Meanwhile, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson will be in Paris today to meet with French President Emmanuel Macron as he seeks resolution to Britain's current impasse with the European Union over Brexit. Boris Johnson had told the EU the backstop plan for the Irish border must be scrapped because it is unviable and anti-democratic. Well, let's bring in Juliana Olayinka now, my colleague at London studios, to bring us up to speed on how the markets are reacting to this. Good afternoon, Juliana. So how are the markets reacting at the moment to that letter by Boris Johnson to European Council President Donald Tusk over Irish backstop? In early trade, of course, we saw the pounds fall.
Good afternoon, Chimeze. Well, I must say the backstop remains one of the strongest contentious issues that are stopping a Brexit deal from being concluded. This morning, yes, sterling did drop on the euro and on the dollar, and that's purely because nobody can see a way out of this hard border between Ireland and the North. The Northern Ireland Unionist Party, the DUP, who are actually in a union with the Conservative Party to maintain their strength in government. They've supported Boris Johnson. They say that there shouldn't be any border between the EU and Northern Ireland. But this is where the problem lies in. Donald Tusk has reacted to Boris Johnson's 4-page letter, and he says it's actually the complete difference to what he said, and that if they do have this backstop on the border, then it will stop any fractions between the North and the South. And of course, we saw that for decades there was a contentious issue. Let's actually look at the specifics and the numbers here. At intraday, the FTSE All-Share is up 0.36%. The FTSE 100 is also up 0.39%. And the FTSE 250 is also up by 0.25%. It's the currencies that actually have been affected. In currencies, the British pound is down on the US dollar by 0.47%, down on the euro by 0.51%, and down on the Japanese yen by 0.76%. You mentioned, Chimmy, that Boris Johnson will be meeting Macron in France later today. Of course, there's the G7 meeting at the weekend. He's also due to meet Merkel, and some of his not his critics, some of the people that are supporting Boris Johnson's letter to the EU are saying that he is trying to start negotiations. Of course, summer is just coming to an end and everybody has been on recess. So the fact that he's now opening these negotiations is seen by some quarters as a good thing. For others, they're saying there cannot be no deal. And of course, Theresa May, even though this was voted down 3 times in the House of Commons, this seems to be the only way to stop any sort of hard tension or hard border in Ireland.
Well, looking at those equities there you reeled out, AstraZeneca is among the FTSE 100's biggest rises this morning. That was after announcing that one of its drugs is also good at cutting the risk of a fatal heart attack. It's intraday now. It's AstraZeneca still going on the back of that announcement.
Well, AstraZeneca, Chimeze, is still up this afternoon by 1.7%. Really good news, not just for traders, but for the millions of people across the world who suffer with heart conditions, and not just heart conditions as well. This trial that they've done with their new drug is also going to help people that suffer with type 2 diabetes. This is the 3rd phase of trials that the Anglo-Swedish drug maker has tried with patients, and it has been a success. And of course, traders were very excited about that because we haven't seen any new groundbreaking heart failure drugs go into the market over the past 5 years. So this is seen as a big success. And yes, it was up this morning, and at intraday, it has just peaked up by 0.1% so far.
All right, that's a good one for AstraZeneca, and let's hope quite a lot of people will be saved from heart attack issues. Thank you for those updates, Juliana. And stocks in Asia were mixed today as the People's Bank of China published its new loan prime rates, which would result in cheaper borrowing costs for companies. Mainland Chinese stocks were mixed on the day, with the Shanghai Composite shedding earlier as it slipped 0.11%. The Shenzhen Composite added 0.13%. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 rose 0.55%, while the Topix Index added 0.83%. Australia's ASX 200 closed 1.2% higher, And over in South Korea, the Kospi gained 1.05%. In Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index returned to negative territory.